Alright, what up dudes? Today, through a wildly requested video, I'm going to be showing off a couple more of my Marvel Rivals character kits. Now, I've done Vanguards, Duelists, and Strategists throughout the 5 characters I've made for each of the 3 roles. This time around, I decided to switch it up. Much like how I did the Thunderbolts, I decided that instead of focusing on the specific role they would fill, I would like to show off a specific type of character. Now, if you like this style of video and you want to see it a bit more, let me know down in the comments below. But today we're going to be focusing on 2 mutants that I want in each role of Marvel Rivals. Now, full transparency, I hope we don't get another duelist for a while. That one is so overinflated. But overall, I really enjoy the mutants. I think they're really cool, and honestly, they're usually better than some of the other superheroes, just because you generally know what you're going to get when you see a mutant on screen. If you see Cyclops, you know he's most likely going to solve it by shooting lasers out of his eyes. Or if you see Wolverine on screen, you know someone's dying. Now, before we get into these kits, do me a favor, go on down and hit that like and that sub button. And as always, if there's anything you do differently or if there's a character you want to see next time, leave a comment down below. Now, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. Let's trip it with our first Vanguard.
It's time to fight dirty.
Time to sweep the leg, Johnny.
Hey! Pick on someone your own size.
That's such a you thing to say. Go get him, Tiger! Big CGI fight coming up.
Now, I love Colossus. Complete transparency here, I was introduced to him by the Deadpool movies, but by doing a little bit more research on him, he seems so interesting. And I think there's a lot that they really could do with the Colossus style character in Marvel Rivals. Now, getting into his abilities, I think there's one that's going to be pretty controversial, but starting off, we have his primary fire, Steel Fist Strike. This is just a simple punch combo similar to Hulk, but his final hit rears back and deals knockback to whoever he punches. For a secondary fire, we have Knockdown. This is where Colossus dashes forward wherever he's aiming, and if he collides with anyone, they're knocked back and take a lot more damage if they're bumped into a wall. Now, if the wall is also breakable, then they're sent flying through it with the extra damage. Moving on to his first actual ability, we have Steel Yourself. This is where Colossus slams his metal fists into his chest, kind of like a gorilla, giving himself overshields dependent on how many allies are in the area, and a damage buff dependent on how many enemies are in said area. For his second ability, we have Tungsten Trailblazer. This allows Colossus to sprint forward, and anyone he collides with takes damage and is knocked up. This is very similar to the Thing's charge, however, it would be resource-based, similar to Captain America. Third ability, we have Farmer's Toss. If you didn't know, Colossus is a Russian farmer. He doesn't generally want to be more than that, but he has such awesome abilities and he's very useful, so most people kind of want him to be more than that. But this is where Colossus rips a hunk of rock out of the floor and hurls at an enemy, dealing a small AoE of damage, knocking them down and stunning them for a moment. Moving on to his passive, I gave him Heavy Metal. Now, this passive simply makes it so that whenever Colossus falls from a height greater than his basic jump height, he slams into the ground, dealing an AoE to everyone around him and kind of pinning anyone if he lands directly on them. I would kind of have this work in a similar way to the height requirement for Venom's Slam. So if you're leaping off of something, then you're always going to get it. And the higher you jump from, the bigger the AoE, the bigger the damage, and the more damage you deal if you actually pin them. I think of it kind of like a vertical Reinhardt charge, and I think that's hilarious. Not to mention the potential team up with Rocket Raccoon, where you get the jetpack, shoot into the air, and plummet into the ground. Oh, it would be so cool. But speaking of team ups, let's move on to his actual team up. And this one is actually brought up in Marvel Rivals. I call it the Metallic Fastball Special. With Magneto anchoring, Colossus and Wolverine both gain access to this fastball special. Now, this allows Magneto to lift Colossus and hurl him like how Hulk can hurl Wolverine. Now, this also allows Colossus to throw Wolverine exactly like Hulk or Thing can, but he can do it while Magneto is holding him. So, Magneto can hurl Colossus, and then Colossus can throw Wolverine while he's midair after he lands, whenever he really wants. And I just think it's hilarious to think that you could have just an enormous metallic man crash into the ground, and then he's holding just an angry rodent in his hands that can cut through anything. For his ultimate ability, we have the controversial one that I was talking about earlier. I call it Unstoppable Colossus. This is where Colossus reaches into the underworld and pulls out the gem of Sidorak, which, if you're unaware, is what gives Juggernaut all of his abilities. Colossus then merges with this and becomes Juggerlossus, also known as the Unstoppable Colossus. During this time, he's much bigger, he's wearing the Juggernaut armor, All CC abilities, like Bucky's hook or anything, do the reverse effect, meaning if Bucky hooks you, then he is pulled towards you. If someone tries to sleep you or freeze you, it bounces off of you and loosely tracks towards them. Now, I won't lie, I did have a lot of trouble coming up with enemy and friendly lines for these characters, so I apologize if they're not all that good or unique. But as always, let me know what you would have these guys say for their friendly and enemy lines down below if you have an idea or two. For some cosmetics that I'd like to see for Colossus, obviously you've got the MCU and comics designs. I would also love to see the time whenever he became the Horseman of War. I think that was awesome, and I'd love a painter-inspired skin, maybe by some Russian painters or just some of the basic ones everyone knows, like Van Gogh. Colossus being a painter is something that's kind of forgotten in most of his comics, and definitely in the MCU adaptations. So either a painter or a farmer skin I think would be really cute. Overall, for how I could see this Colossus playing, I can definitely see him being a bit more of an off-tank, very brawl heavy. He wants to be in the fight, he wants to constantly be knocking people around, but he's also pretty opportunistic, so maybe I could see a bit of a bunker strategy where you kind of want people to come to you so you can bump them into walls. I can see a lot of this working out really well for him, kind of where he can use Steel Yourself to give himself a ton of overshields, dive into the enemy team by jumping off a building or something, or using the jetpack from Rocket, slamming into the ground to deal some damage, and then using his various charge abilities to knock people around into walls and really kind of break up team comps. Overall, that's just my thoughts. If there's anything I didn't mention that you'd like to see from Colossus, or if there's just an ability that you think doesn't really do much and should be redone in a future episode, let me know down below. I'm absolutely going to redo some of these characters as this series goes on.
Unleash your power! Let go, Jean! Jean, let go!
For our second Vanguard, we have Jean Grey. I don't know why I always say Jean instead of Jean, but I'm going to say it for the rest of this episode, so if you're upset, make sure you let me know in the comments down below. Now, I actually really like Jean Grey. Fox was rough, but after X3, I think they did Jean a little bit better. But overall, I wouldn't say that any of her designs are necessarily bad. Now, before anyone says it, I know everybody wants Jean Grey to be a duelist, but every character can be a duelist. I've said this a million times, but every character could be a duelist, and it's the easiest role to fill out for a character. Side note, while editing this, I did notice that she is a duelist. I will be going forward with her as a Vanguard here, but it is kind of funny that they made her a duelist after that long rant that I had. Just wanted to come in here and say that. I think Jean Grey could work off of the actual interpretations of the Phoenix a bit more and be a Vanguard strategist hybrid. Something we haven't seen yet in Marvel Rivals, and I would love to see. Starting out with her primary fire, we have Psychic Flamethrower. This is where Jean fires out flames from her hands that pierce through enemies and barriers for 15 meters-ish. Don't take the numbers here too seriously, they're just rough estimates for what I would assume work. It deals moderate damage and gradually builds up a burn meter on the enemy. If it fills completely, but all melee damage the character deals is halved. I did take some inspiration from Pokemon for that portion, but I still think it fits, and it would give a great counter to some of the melee characters. Granted, I don't think they really need the counter, but I just think it's something that Marvel Rivals could do, and it's fairly interesting. Since there's a lot of abilities that can block projectiles, or like Magneto's Bubble that can just block everything for a couple seconds, but there's nothing that explicitly targets the melee characters. So that if you're getting dove by Wolverine, I think lighting him on fire and then him being able to deal less damage would be really cool. Got off onto a bit of a tangent there, but for his secondary fire, we have Fiery Regeneration, where Jean utilizes her psychic abilities to emit an AoE burst of flames attached to allies for a few seconds and heal an amount of HP dependent on how much her passive has picked up. Speaking of, now's a good segue to talk about her passive, Phoenix Reserve. This makes Jean completely immune to mind control abilities. This would be like Emma's ult, Mantis's sleep. Additionally, while using her Wings of Protection, an ability we'll get to in just a moment, and her primary fire to burn people with projectiles, she'll gradually build up her Phoenix Reserve, making her secondary fire that we just talked about do more healing, and her Scorching Ray, another ability we'll get to in a minute, deal more damage. For her first ability, we have Illusory Hallucination. This is where Jean selects one target, and fires a mental projectile similar to Emma Frost's health crystal thing. And if she hits with the enemy, then at any time she can hit the button again to make their screen look as if they've just activated their ultimate ability for a few seconds. Now, it is important to note this does not consume any ult charge, nor does it actually create the ability. The hallucination is only on the character's screen. For her second ability, we have Wings of Protection. We talked about it earlier, but the actual mechanics allow her to create an area around her roughly the size of Ultron's healbot radius, and any projectiles that cross through this area are completely disintegrated and added to her passive, slowly building it up. And her third ability, Scorching Ray, another one we talked about earlier, allows Jean to hold her hands together and combine her primary fire flames into one concentrated beam that pierces for double the range and deals more damage with a quickened, almost immediate burn buildup, dependent on how much her passive is charged. If it's fully charged, it would immediately light people on fire and it would have a much longer range. Overall, the ability is dependent on how much fuel you want to pump into it. Since we've already talked about her passive, let's get on to her team up, Phoenix Revival. This is where Jean is the anchor, gaining more HP and a slight healing buff. And now whenever Adam, Mantis, or Star-Lord revive themselves, whenever the cocoon explodes out, allowing them to move again, it explodes, knocking people back and dealing some fire damage. Now, this could be really cool if all three are dead and they all three kind of work together to respawn in the same area at the same time. You could kind of nuke an area. I think that would be really cool. Moving on to her ultimate, we have Phoenix Flame Fireball. This is where Jean screams out, summoning a massive fireball above her head that she can charge as long as she wishes. And once it explodes, anyone in the AoE immediately gets lit on fire, taking damage or healing over time, and the immediate burst damage or healing from the explosion. Now, this is very similar to the ultimate I gave Spyro in my Skylanders Rivals video, which if you haven't checked out, I would highly recommend it. I'm very proud of it and I really like it, and I would honestly kind of like to keep doing it. Shameless plug aside, overall the cosmetics, obviously there would be the Fox and the comic inspirations, but I would also like to see the White Phoenix skin for her, and not to mention that a Will of Galactica skin for her, where her flames turn purple, would be absolutely awesome. Getting into her duelists, I really wanted to make sure that all of these characters weren't just duelists. If they were duelists, I wanted them to be at least a unique flavor of duelist. That way it's not just another guy who punches or shoots. I had my fill of that with the Thunderbolts video, trust me. I really wanted Quicksilver to play a little bit more like Tracer. I know we already have a Tracer character with Star-Lord, but honestly, I really wish they didn't make Star-Lord Tracer. The flips and the kicks and the flying is cool, but it doesn't necessarily strike me as anything Star-Lord-y, I guess. I don't know. I think there was more interesting things they could do with Star-Lord, and in a future video, I will be talking about this in a Marvel Rewrites video, where I talk more about how certain characters could have been done differently or even better in some cases, but that's for a future video. As of right now, let's get into his primary fire, adequately named Lightspeed Punches. This is a flurry of really fast punches. So they are melee range, but they shoot about as fast as Tracer's bullets would, or I guess Star-Lord's shots. For a secondary, we have Quick Move. This allows Pedro to dash forward 15 meters instantly. He has 5 uses besides the cooldown. Now this would work very similarly to Tracer's dashes, but instead of actually teleporting, he just zips over there. For his first ability, we have Molecular Destabilization. This ability has a resource meter, allowing him to phase through unbreakable walls or objects. He can still phase through breakable ones, but they shatter as he goes through them. For his second ability, we have Whiplash, where Pietro grabs an ally and instantly brings them back to wherever you put the flag. Flag is automatically placed at spawn, but you can reposition it by hitting the crouch button. Now, I think it goes without saying, but I just wanted to double down here. He doesn't just grab them and drag them back like Lifeweaver, it is confirmation based. So make sure that you tell your supports that you're about to grab them so they can be ready to hit their confirmation button, rather than just trying to quickly do it out of nowhere. For his third ability, we have Sound Burst. This is where Pietro runs 40 meters forward before instantly returning to the exact spot you activated it in, and everyone in that line in an AoE around that line gets deafened. While deafened, it's about what you'd expect. They can't hear anything, footsteps, ultimate ability activations, absolutely anything. Their headsets are the equivalent of turned off, except for like, I wouldn't even want a ringing sound because that can hurt some people's ears. So I would just like for it to just be like, and then it's just dead silent and you can slowly hear it come back up. For his passive, we have Quick Time. This allows him to keep more momentum whenever he jumps, allowing him to clear massive distances while using his secondary. Also, this wouldn't be a part of his passive, more just around his build as a character, but he would have the fastest base movement speed in the game easily. Upon jumping, you would leap into the air and you can use your secondary fire to carry that momentum forward, and I think this could add some amazing plays with just that added mobility. For his team up, we have Familial Chaos. Scarlet Witch is the anchor, and it gives Magneto and Quicksilver new abilities. Wanda gets her damage buff, and Magneto regains his old team up that allows him to swing the sword and throw the arc of chaotic energy, and Pietro gains a new ability allowing him to leave a trail of chaos behind him whenever he runs for a certain amount of time. Now, this ability would be activatable similar to Magneto, but during it he would become exponentially faster and leave the trail behind him wherever he walks. It also would affect anywhere he dashes or if he uses sound burst or anything along those lines, but this is just slight tick damage that can really add up, especially if you run in like a zigzag kind of pattern. Especially if you run in like a zigzag pattern, it's really hard for people to get out of it. It can stack up pretty quickly. Now for its ultimate ability, I really love it. It's called Mach 10 Punch. You get to choose an ability, you get to choose an enemy within range and instantly run over and deck them right in the teeth, dealing insane damage and creating a sonic boom right off of their face, damaging everyone in an AoE and deafening them, making them able to hear absolutely nothing for a few seconds, essentially setting off a flashbang, blinding and deafening them for just a few seconds. Now, this was the only one that I came up with, actually, I feel like pretty good ultimate lines for. If you don't like them, then feel free to give me your own in the comments down below. But moving on to his cosmetics, obviously I would love an MCU design. I actually really like the Age of Ultron one. I wish they got to do more with that. And getting shot down by bullets as a speedster is lame as hell. At least let him go down fighting Ultron. Also, I'd love to see his Fox debut. I think everybody knows Dahmer played him very well. And then there's obviously the comics, but as for a little bit of a rarer pull, I would like to see the Mutant X skin. I think that would be cool. I will be doing a viewer suggested video, so make sure you leave yours down below and you might be featured in it. Now overall, I've seen a lot of people argue back and forth that Gambit should be a strategist or a duelist or this or that. I even saw one person ask him to be a Vanguard, I think, which could be fun. But anyway, I decided to make this Gambit a duelist strategist combo with his primary fire card tricks. He summons a deck of cards charged with kinetic energy that he tosses, sticking to enemies that can be detonated using his secondary fire, simply just called detonation. All it does is it detonates all the cards on a person or a surface. So it's gone to his first ability, Up the Ante. This is where Gambit charges a whole deck all at once and fires them out in a continuous stream. This essentially just ups his attack speed by like a billion. And immediately after the duration comes to an end, they automatically explode after the last one hits. For his second ability, we have Kinetic Acceleration. This basically just allows you to charge the weapon of an ally you choose, doubling the damage of their first attack after the ability is used. Immediately after they hit that first attack, it is done. For his third ability, we have Staff Slice. This is where Remis charges his staff and slashes through the air, knocking enemies back with a melee hit and sending a kinetic arc through the air that pierces through enemies and through shields. I like to think about this similarly to Iron Fist's kick. It also has an arc that follows after it for a few meters. For Gambit's passive, we have High Roller. This simply just allows Gambit to have a chance to crit no matter where his actual attack lands. So it's a very small chance, but when you're hitting 52 times, I think it's going to crit fairly often. For his team up, I wanted to give him Kinetic Claws, but he also has a secondary team up that you'll see later on in the video. Now for Kinetic Claws, Gambit is obviously the anchor, gaining simply a damage buff, but Wolverine and Black Panther gain an activatable ability where their claws get charged with kinetic energy, and whenever they do their melee attack, it will launch forward for 30 meters, allowing them to attack from slightly longer range. However, it stops once they hit a character or a wall. Unlike NetEase, I won't let any of my abilities go through walls, except one or two, I guess. I don't play much Black Panther because I'm not a fucking degenerate, but for Wolverine is a character that I do play fairly often. Leaping up into the air and activating your shout to get that little propel forward could be really cool if you could slash the air and kind of rain down fire on them until you actually hit the ground. Getting into his ultimate ability, we have Kinetic Flush. This is where Remy stabs his staff into the ground, charging the area around it, causing random explosions along with constant explosions wherever any enemy would step. Also, while in this area, all allies gain a damage boost. Now, I think that this ultimate could go absolutely insane, especially if you're last standing on a point, stab that staff into the ground, and suddenly your entire team gets an advantage staying on the point while the enemy team can't stay on the point or they're just going to explode. Now for some cosmetics that I'd like to see for Gambit. Obviously, we need the Channing Tatum skin. Then there's also his Fox debut for the Wolverine Origins movie that nobody really wants to remember, but I'm going to make you remember right now. There's also the comics, and I'd love to have a wedding skin with him and Rogue in a similar way to how we have Mr. Fantastic and Sue Storm. Moving on to our strategists, I was going to originally do Angel, as many of you have suggested, but I got a really good idea for another character, and I decided to save Angel for a future video, because this one was just way too cool to pass up on.
Thought your kind were the good guys.
You killed those, Sugar. Now, you get me.
Now, when coming up with some inspiration for how Rogue would work as a strategist, I actually got a lot of inspiration from Moira from Overwatch. Being able to absorb the life force of someone and then immediately spout it back out sounded perfect for Rogue. So, for her primary and secondary fire, we have Hand of Healing and Hand of Harm. Her healing hand has a resource meter that pulses out healing in a cone in front of her. For secondary fire, we have Hand of Harm. This is a little bit larger cone area that allows... This is a much larger cone area that will refill the resource meter in a similar way to how Moira's works. For our first ability, we have Power Sap. This is where Rogue projects an attack, and if she hits a character, she gains a single use of any of the character's abilities. Additionally, you learn the ult charge of the character you sapped. This ability stems a lot from Rogue being able to copy the abilities of other characters while sapping their life force when she touches them. Also, she gains their memories whenever she touches them. Hence why she would learn the ultimate charge of the character sapped. And just to clear up how the UI would work in my eyes, I would think that after hitting a character, all of your abilities essentially swap to theirs. And once you hit any of them to activate it, then your abilities would swap back to normal. Now moving on to her second ability, we have Lashing Life Aura. This is where Rogue fires an orb that spins around really fast, creating an aura of healing and damage. As it slowly moves forward, it gets bigger and bigger upon dealing damage. However, it gets smaller whenever it heals. This increases the radius until it hits a wall when it pops. However, it does bounce off shields. For our third ability, we have Soaring Dash. This is similar to the dash that Ultron has. However, upon activating it, this turns Rogue into a flying character for a few seconds. Now onto her passive, we have Life Force Conversion. This just simply allows Rogue to regain her healing resource whenever she deals damage for any reason. Additionally, while any of her abilities are dealing damage, she passively regains HP. Moving on to her team up, we have the LeBeau Union, where Rogue and Gambit team up. Rogue adding a healing effect onto Gambit's ultimate, and all of the damage Gambit dealing adding onto Rogue's passive, constantly refreshing her resource cooldown. Now for her ultimate ability, we have Life Force Exchange. This is where Rogue calls down an area where enemies take damage and allies get healed passively. I would assume it's roughly the size of Sue Storm's ultimate. However, all damage dealt to enemies is distributed to allies as overshields. This is kind of what would make it a little bit different from a Sue Storm ult. Since it doesn't turn people invisible, this is the secondary effect that would really make her worth choosing. Now, I couldn't think of too many cosmetics for Rogue just because I'm not all that familiar with the character. Obviously, there's the comic and the Fox debuts, and also she would get the shared wedding LeBeau skin. I didn't even know that Rogue and Gambit got together until I was researching this video, but now that I know it, it's actually pretty adorable.
I didn't know I still had that. There's so much more to you than you know. Not just pain and anger. It's good too, I felt it. And when you can access all that, you'll possess a power no one can match. Not even me.
Now, Professor X being our last character is almost kind of fitting. He's never really wanted to be center stage, he just wanted a new world, so taking up the last spot here feels very fitting for his character. And taking inspiration from the other telepathic abilities we have in Marvel Rivals, I thought that I came up with a really unique kit for him. For his primary fire, I gave him Psionic Pulse. This is a 360-degree attack that hits everyone within 30 meters. This heals heals allies and deals damage, and I thought it would be really funny that whenever he runs out of ammo, he either rubs his head like he had a headache, or also think it could be really cool for his design to be wearing Cerebro. So maybe he has to recharge Cerebro, or maybe put some new batteries in. I don't really know how Cerebro works. But moving on, we have his secondary fire, Psionic Spear. This is a focus blast that targets any previously selected enemy through any walls and then erupts into an AoE damage and slow. As for how you would select an enemy, I would like to think that this is a two-part attack where the first time you hit your secondary fire button, you lock onto them, and the second time you hit it, it actually fires the pulse. For his first ability, we have Brain Freeze. This is where Xavier fires a mental projectile that shuts down all movement abilities as well as blinds anyone it hits. After taking a percentage of their health and damage, they wake up, and I even tossed around the idea to let it be an AoE around him, though much smaller than his primary fire, but I thought that having a 360-degree stun could be really busted. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Should I have kept it? Do you like what I did better? Either way, I'd love to hear what you guys think about these kits. For his second ability, you have Mental Tether. This is where you create a link between the minds of your allies, sharing their experience and allowing them all to gain ult charge unanimously. For the duration, you can gain a total of 15% of your ult charge before it automatically ends. I would imagine this would be under an extremely long cooldown, but I also know there's no real ability like this in Marvel Rivals or in Overwatch or anything else. Even Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, I don't think had anything like this. But overall, I think it could be very unique. It would need some tweaking, and obviously my design isn't perfect for it, but I think it could be really cool. And on to his third ability, we have Calling All Mutants. So Xavier calls out to every character on the map, and for a few moments, he can see enemies anywhere. I want to make sure that if this was an ability, it would be on a strategist, because this isn't a character that can necessarily take too much advantage of this. Sure, he has Psionic Spear that he can shoot through the wall, but that's not going to deal an insane amount of damage like Adam's at primary fire would. It would deal more steady damage, just like one hit from Mantis, or maybe one of Jeff's projectiles, but they've butchered my boy so badly I don't even know if that's a good representation anymore. Now for his passive, we have Master Telepath. This allows Charles to affect characters through walls and shields. This means that if he activates his primary fire and is snug against a wall and there's a Black Panther on the other side of the wall waiting to peek his head out, then that Black Panther is going to take damage. An additional passive I had an idea for was called Wheelchair Bound. I feel terrible saying that out loud. Where Charles cannot have his speed reduced in any way, and while he's stunned, he can continue to move naturally. Essentially, he has a Cerebro-controlled wheelchair, meaning that if he's stunned, Cerebro can take over, and the program can basically drive him home or keep him moving. I thought it was funny. Maybe it's distasteful. Overall, I think it would be really cool to have a Professor X that's actually in a wheelchair rather than just standing like every other character. Especially if that wheelchair had a slight damage reduction on it, so you had to shoot him in his actual body. Now for his team up, we have Old Friends. This team up joins Professor X and Magneto, giving Professor X a healing buff. Whenever Magneto uses his ultimate ability, he can activate this team up, taking off his helmet and adding it into the ball, changing it so that it no longer has an upper limit where it explodes. It just keeps getting bigger and stronger. I like to think that this is Charles clearing his mind and helping him find the area between anger and peace, kind of like we see in X-Men First Class, when he's able to move that enormous ass satellite. And this would also give Magneto's ultimate much more use, even though it's already, in my opinion, one of the strongest ults in the game, at least value wise. I think that this would be a great way to just make Magneto even better because I love Magneto. Now on to his ultimate ability. I didn't want to just give Professor X a bigger AoE healing around him, even though I very well could just have his ultimate extend the reach of his primary fire throughout the entire map. I thought of that and I thought it would be really cool, but I wanted to be a little more unique and give him Cerebro Possession, allowing Xavier to enter a Doctor Strange portaling style view, and in this view, he can select a character to possess them and turn them into a character on his team. During this time, Xavier is completely motionless and helpless. He has full control over whichever character he chooses, allowing him to use any of their abilities. For example, if he mind controls a Cloak and Dagger, he can heal his team, and he forces the enemy team to make the decision of do they kill their own teammate in order to stop Xavier from basically turning it into a mandatory 5v6, or do they keep him around and instead try to go kill the Xavier on the enemy team. Now, the only caveat I would put on this ultimate is I wouldn't let Xavier use the ultimate ability of someone he possesses. It takes so long to build an ultimate for some characters that I think being able to just possess someone and throw their ultimate against the wall is just too harsh for certain characters. For his cosmetics, obviously I would love the Fox, or well, I guess either Fox skin. The Fox and the MCU skins are both awesome. Obviously there's the comics debut, and personally, I would just like to see the wheelchair turn into a monster truck or get like those awesome like tractor wheels. I think it could be really cool to have car detailing on a wheelchair for Marvel Rivals. But yeah, those are my picks for 6 mutants that I want to see in Marvel Rivals. All of them are fairly popular. If you'd like to see a bit more obscure mutants next time, leave them down in the comments below, and I will absolutely get to them as soon as I can. These characters do take a good while to make, but I love making this content, and it seems to do pretty well on the channel, so I will keep doing it. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you're unaware, I do also have other videos on my channel where I'm building out a DC Rivals roster, and I recently put one out that was a Skylanders Rivals. If you're not familiar with Skylanders, don't worry, I give a good breakdown of it in the beginning, but overall, I was really proud of those videos. They don't do quite as well as the Marvel Rivals ones, but I thoroughly enjoy them, so if you could, do me a favor and go show them some love as well. Now, with all that said, thank you all so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye!